DJ Bien-Aime with me in studio. We learned something about DJ over the course of the past week.
What is it?
We had no idea that we were in the same presence as a man with a title, Mr. President of the Houston chapter of the Pro Football Writers of America. DJ, I'm sorry, we haven't been calling you by your title for this entire time, but we found this out when you gave the Good Guy of the Year award to CJ Stroud. I really appreciate you for not getting mad at me for not calling you by your official title.
Go to hell.
But hey, on a serious note, you're now covering for the first time in your career the division champions, and it's pretty crazy how things have happened for the Houston Texans to go from losing to the Jaguars, who were 8-3, to Saturday night winning, Jaguars losing on Sunday, to winning the AFC South. We both thought there was a chance they could win the division this year, but the way in which they did it is pretty amazing.
Yeah, I know. I mean, again, like, they split with the Jaguars. Like, once they lost the second Jaguars game, I'm thinking, okay, the Jaguars got it wrapped up. They're 8-3. They should be able to cruise to the title. They didn't really have that many tough opponents on the schedule. They did have like a stretch where they had to play the Niners and Ravens back-to-back weeks and the Browns, but I thought that they could make it through, that little period, at least with go at least 1-2 during that stretch. They went 0-3, obviously, which kept the door open. And then they lost to the Titans, and that it's funny, like, their season this year was very similar to the Titans season last year, right? The Titans start out well. I think they were like 7-4, and then they end up losing out. The Jaguars, they start 8-3. They basically go 1 and whatever the math is on that, like what, 1-5.
They go from 8-3 to 1-5.
To 1-5, right? And they missed the playoffs, so it's hilarious how it all unfolded. Who would have thought that Saturday game would have been for the division? Because funny, like, after the game, me and some reporters were in the press box, some Texans PR, and we're sitting down, we're like trying to figure out the scenarios. I'm like, man, Miami got to come through tomorrow night. Miami got to come through tomorrow night, mainly so we don't got to go to Buffalo. We don't got to go to Buffalo because if Miami wins, then the Texans go to Kansas City. Jonathan Alexander and Houston Clark was like, yeah, man, I wouldn't mind going to Kansas City. Barbecue, da-da-da-da. I'm like, I don't want to go Buffalo at all. Someone says, they got really good wings. I'm not going to Buffalo for some wings. Thank you. So, then, like, while we're discussing all these scenarios, like, is there a chance we can go to Miami? I'm like, nah, ain't no chance. Like, basically, like, a lot would have to go in, the Texans' favor and the Dolphins' favor for them to meet up. Then Lindsay, one of the Texans PR people, says, hey, peeps, you guys could, it could be at home. The game could be at home. You never know. Maybe the Titans handle business. And I was like, okay, yeah, maybe that does happen. And then less than 24 hours later, the Texans are AFC South champions, and now they're going to host a playoff game, which means nobody has to travel. Thank God.
It's pretty crazy with the way things have been over the last couple of years, too. Since 2011, there are only 3 teams that have more division titles than the Texans: Patriots, Chiefs, Packers.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yep.
And they've won it again despite having some extreme lows in the midst of this run since 2011. I mean, you had the number 1 draft pick after the 2014 season. Right. And on top of that, you had the number 2 pick after this past year. So here we are going from worst to first.
Yep.
DeMeco Ryans, is he the NFL Coach of the Year? We were discussing some of the counter arguments against him. I really wish that we could give this award out after Saturday, because we're going to see DeMeco Ryans with his quarterback against Kevin Stefanski. I think it should be between those two.
Yeah.
And I think also on Saturday in Shane Steichen, he did lose it because the team didn't make the playoffs.
Right,
also, I thought he made a pretty dumb decision at the end by not putting the guy that they used for the entire drive leading up to that 4th down on the field after a timeout, no matter how banged up he might have been. I think Taylor wanted to be out there. So to go back to just the question, is DeMeco Ryans the coach of the year in the NFL for 2023?
Yeah, I think it's between 3 guys: Stefanski, Dan Campbell, obviously DeMeco. What DeMeco has the advantage is he won his division, and he was able to withstand the loss of his quarterback, because that's kind of what is helping Stefanski in the argument is, he lost his quarterback, and he actually, this is like his fourth quarterback, and
he started the fifth one on Sunday, but it was because they did just not want to play.
Exactly.
It wasn't out of necessity. It was more out of we're protecting Flacco for the playoffs.
Right. So I mean, again, like they've lost. There's a bunch of them. Obviously, they lost their starting quarterback. They've gone through like 4 different quarterbacks, and they lost their best offensive player in Nick Chubb, but they've still been able to win a lot of games, obviously lock up that 5 seed. DeMeco's argument is obviously turning the team, making it, taking over a team that went 3-13-1 and winning the division. I think that alone is his strongest argument. Now, I've seen some people make the argument that you can't really name any Texan players. The fact that he was able to turn this team around from a roster standpoint, blah, 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 and like they don't have that many household names is absolute garbage. That's like the worst take to have.
Let me read the opinion. Bomani Jones, who is a Houston guy for what it's worth, said, name 7 Houston Texans. Do it. Take your time. And if you can name 7 Houston Texans, think about the 5 names you're giving after Stroud and Tunsil. I can name a rack of Browns, very good to great, Cleveland Browns. And this is in response to somebody who was arguing for Stefanski to be coach of the year because they lost Nick Chubb, played 4, now 5 different quarterbacks, and cycled offensive linemen in and out. So I guess Bomani's making the argument that there are not many named Houston Texans, and that's why Ryan should be the guy.
Names versus actual production at the end of the day, because I think one thing that we do in the media space is like we get so enamored with names instead of actually just watching the games and seeing who's actually good. And I think what the Coach of the Year award, what it's turned into who the media thinks who the media misrepresented or misunderstood coming into the season. Like, I didn't know that they had this and that. But if you just would have like done the legitimate research and like really like studied what this could be, then you would realize the Texans, remember, we talked about it on our pod after the draft that, and I was very confident saying this, they should win at the bare minimum 6 to 7 games. If they don't get into that range, they might not have the right coach. I was very out front with that, mainly because I saw the roster, right? We're going to have Stingley in a much better system for his ability. He has 5 interceptions this year, tied for 5th in 10 games. Obviously, Steven Nelson has had a solid year. He's had a good year in terms of pass rating when targeted. Obviously, I mentioned the D-line was going to be drastically better. You add in Sheldon, you add in Will Anderson. Obviously, Jonathan Gennard in 2021 had 8 sacks in 12 games. We knew what he could bring in a pass rushing standpoint. DeMeco bringing in his scheme, it was going to elevate the D-line and elevate the secondary. We were just more questions about the linebacker. Then on offense, we knew their offensive line from a pass protection standpoint was going to be pretty stout. Obviously, the injuries came in and we see where it is now. But again, you still had on paper Laramie Tunsil, who's arguably the best left tackle in the game, and you have Shaq Mason, who is a Super Bowl champ, was a Super Bowl starter for the Patriots and the Buccaneers. He's obviously a very good guard. I mean, I've seen from ESPN Bill
Barnwell?
Well, yeah, he had him and his All-Pro as the second team All-Pro for right guard. So, like, they had talent on offensive line. Obviously, Titus Howard gets hurt. It is what it is. Then, obviously, we thought Dameon Pierce was going to be a lot better than what he was, but they still brought in a 1,000-yard scrimmage back to be his backup, who ended up usurping him and becoming a starter. But that was in your room. Quite tight end, obviously, Dalton Schultz. We saw him with the Cowboys. Everybody knows any Cowboy. Then you go to the receiver room. That was a question. Cool. But Tank, Nico, they obviously completely exceeded expectations and played as a legitimate 1-2 punch. And then CJ, it was more, how was he going to look as a rookie? But the roster around CJ was never, like, once you looked at the actual roster, and factoring last year, they had 6 losses that came within the fourth quarter where it was a 1-possession game. They had 6 losses like that, not including the tie. So imagine if half of those games flip. The Texans probably are like 7-10 last year, so they had talent to begin with. This wasn't like bare bones down to the studs operation. So using that argument of like, oh, I don't know who guys are on the Texans, well, maybe just do your research prior to the season, and you wouldn't have been that surprised because there were people around the league, like people that like legitimately studied the Texans where were like, when you actually looked at who's on the roster, oh, wait a minute, they shouldn't be a dumpster fire this year, and they proved that to be the case.
In a way, you're making, I guess, the pro-Stefanski argument a bit here.
I'm not making a pro-Stefanski argument. What I'm making is I think that we in media have to stop, given that this is more my overarching coach of the year. This annoys me. Like when we want to give it to the guy that we think had to overcome the most quote unquote obstacles or blah 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 blah. Like let's just give it to the guy that did the best coaching job. Period. You know what I mean? Like
that makes sense.
Not because like that's how you end up with Brian Daboll, who finished third in his division, getting coach of the year when he was getting waxed by the Cowboys and Eagles. He was literally like, think about like, so you're telling me because in last year Ron Rivera went 8-1. If he would have won one more game or maybe beat the Giants one time, he would have got coach of the year. Come on now, you know that makes no sense to me. Like it gets under my skin like the way we give coach of the year based on like us not being willing to admit that we were wrong about how we perceive that roster because it's always players over plays.
What you're framing it as, and I agree with this, is that we give this award to the coach that we had a completely different opinion about going into the year.
Yeah, instead of, just giving it to people that have, because again, like if you get, let's say like 11, 12, 10, 11, 12 wins, you have a good roster. Mm-hmm. Like, because again, it's players over plays. You can't, like, coaches can only do so much. So if you win 10, 11, 12 games, you probably have really good players.
That argument is a good one for Nick Caserio, who said emphatically today that he's going nowhere with those rumors that were out there from noted rumor monger Jason La Canfora. Not usually a lot of teeth to the stuff that he puts out there. So I guess, though, consistent with what you're saying, if people are going to continue to give the Coach of the Year award out to someone they had a completely different opinion about at the beginning of the year, much like a different opinion about the roster, like that is almost a sign that Kevin Stefanski is going to end up winning it. Because going into this year, I think we all thought he was on the hot seat. If things don't work out with he and Deshaun Watson, this is going to be one of the first coaches fired, especially given what we've seen from Jimmy Haslam as owner of the Cleveland Browns. He's been pretty quick with the trigger finger. And instead, Stefanski's done a great job, even though Watson, when he was healthy, outside of that like last half that he played, was very underwhelming at best.
Yes.
I think I've been going back and forth, DJ. I'm having a tough time because I do really think it's between DeMeco and Stefanski. I guess you can make the argument for Dan Campbell too, but I think because of what happened last year with Dan Campbell, and we talk about the changing opinion from one year to the next, I think that basically because Campbell had the surprising year last year and the really strong finish, that people already think that Campbell's pretty good as a coach. So I think it's between these two. And honestly, I don't know who to give it to between the two because the Browns have a very good roster.
Yeah.
And like awesome Super Bowl caliber roster, even without Nick Chubb, even with their quarterback situation, what it is, where DeMeco Ryans has maybe more talent than people were willing to admit going into the year.
Yeah, I mean, me personally, I get Coach of the Year to John Harbaugh. Me personally,
John Harbaugh, okay,
yeah,
the Ravens.
He's gonna have an MVP. Obviously, like he helped orchestrate that entire situation, right? Like, because again, like he fired Greg Roman and brought in Tom Monken to help Lamar reach not just to reach another level, but for him to tap more into his passing bag, which he always had, because Greg Roman didn't necessarily like help tap into that or develop that. And obviously he has I think the best defense in the entire NFL. So yeah, like I would rather give it to the guys that are actually doing like top of the line coaching jobs, right? Not basically a Make-A-Wish Foundation award turned into a Make-A-Wish Foundation award. Like, oh my God, like I thought your team was going to be really bad, but since it's not going to be bad and it wasn't bad, I'm going to give here's this award instead of just giving it. Like the fact that Andy Reid doesn't have that many Coach of the Year awards, or Kyle Shanahan didn't get Coach of the Year award last year. Nick Sirianni didn't win it last year, or like there's a list of guys like
Sean brought it up yesterday. Belichick has 3 and Ron Rivera has 2.
Yeah, exactly. Like what? How does Bill Belichick, arguably the best coach of all time, have only 3 Coach of the Year awards when he has 6 Super Bowls? Oh, he was expected to do it. I mean, just because you're expected to do something, you do it. Should you not get credit for doing something that was that was hard? I understand the expectation. Like I shouldn't get flowers for holding the door open for my girlfriend. I shouldn't get applause.
I think you
for that.
should.
That's different. But
you're a man. Good man.
If the expectation for me with my girl is for me to like fly her out on a private jet for our honeymoon, and I do that, yeah, you're damn right. I should get a pat on the back for that. Because that even though that's a high expectation, I mean, even though that's an expectation, that's a high expectation. I still exceeded that. And that's the same thing with Bill Belichick. He had Tom Brady, so the expectation was always high, and he always exceeded it. So why should he have not gotten more Coach of the Year awards? So yeah, I don't subscribe to like let DeMeco turn into a Make-A-Wish. I hate the award. I hate what everything it stands for because it's pure loserness. It's pure loserness. It's like it's basically participate. Oh, you did better than what we expect you to do. Here's an award for doing better than we expected to, or That's why, like, it makes sense why, like, a lot of coaches don't actually, like, I don't use the word respect the award. That's not the word. But, like, when coaches win that award, it isn't necessarily, like, it's not like when a guy wins MVP or a guy wins Offensive Player of the Year or whatever, because you're basically giving them an award because they exceeded your expectation, but their expectation coming into the season, the coach that is, was to be in that position anyway.
He's DJ Bien-Aime. I'm Paul Gallant. It's the Paul Gallant Show, ESPN 97.5 and 92.5. While we're talking about awards, is CJ Stroud going to be the unanimous Rookie of the Year?
Unanimous? No.
There's Puka Nacua, and there is also Sam Laporta.
Nah, it won't be unanimous, but I think he'll still win it. I don't know what the argument against CJ is.
He's the quarterback. It's almost like, you know what? Hey, the thoughts and prayers to those other two guys.
Yeah, exactly.
But he's the quarterback. They're just screwed.
He threw for 4,000 yards in 15 games.
Okay.
Like he had the highest yards per game
and best touchdown interception ratio in the NFL.
Yeah, like as a rookie. Like let's not overthink this. Like, okay, Puka Nacua, he had a great rookie year. Obviously, he was top 10 in a bunch of categories. Well, yards, that is. I don't even think he had that many touchdowns. But CJ Stroud threw for 4,000 yards. End of discussion.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah.
Bobby Slowick, offensive coordinator for the Houston Texans, is a part of the success. We've seen a lot out of Nico Collins. That first play of the game on Saturday was effing awesome, and they all talked about how they knew that was going to be the first play going into it. Bobby Slowick, the Panthers have, I guess, reached out for permission to interview him to be their next head coach. Do you think Slowick will be here next year?
I would lean towards yes. Obviously, this is my guess. It's not, I haven't done much reporting on this. I'm just guessing on this. But one, I don't think he's ready to be a head coach yet. Like you were a play caller for 1 year. Like it'd be better for him to stay and continue to build and learn. Because I think one of the bigger issues, not issues, but one of the bigger challenges when it comes to being an offensive coordinator is not necessarily like working on what works, but it's more about working on what doesn't work and being able to adjust on the fly, right? Like we kind of see a little bit at times with Mike McDaniel in Miami, like when it's working, he's great. But once the things kind of get off the rails and they're off schedule or whatever, like he struggles to adjust when they get punched in the mouth. He struggles to adjust. We've seen that this year, and I think some of that is due to the fact that he hasn't called plays that long. And this is only his third season calling plays. Right. And then Bobby became a head coach. Actually, this is only his second season calling plays. Actually, Mike McDaniels, because he didn't call plays in San Fran. But obviously, Bobby Slow, this will be his second season. It's more about like just learning how to find answers quicker so you can adjust faster. And again, like being a coach, a head coach, is not about can you call plays, It's more about can you be a leader of men. Right? Like, I know we get enamored with, he draws up fancy plays and things like that, or he has a great defense. But at the end of the day, it's about, can you hire a staff that can execute your vision? Can you make sure everybody's on the same page, or you end up with a situation in Carolina? And you don't want to have that happen. But again, like, there is a maturation process that kind of goes into preparing yourself for being a head coach, because it's more than just calling fancy plays. If that was the case, Adam Gase would have worked. Arthur Smith would have worked. On a defensive side, because Brandon Staley was on first. He only called plays for 1 year, became the head coach with the Chargers, and we saw how that completely bottomed out. So yeah, I'm a big believer in like you're gonna have to he don't got to spend like 2 years is fine, but 1 year is kind of tricky in that sense, because like you're not saying you don't know what you don't know, but again, like it could be problematic in terms of being able to handle some of the rigors that come with being a head coach outside of just calling plays.
The Texans will play the Browns on Saturday. Welcome to the oldest tradition in Houston football, which is that the Texans, if they have a first-round playoff game, it'll be at NRG Stadium at 3:30 on a Saturday. It's a rematch of a game against the Browns where the Browns won rather convincingly on Christmas Eve, 36 22. There was no CJ Stroud in that game. So last question, where are you at with this matchup compared to what we just saw between these two teams, where the Browns really gave the Texans a lot of trouble, both with Joe Flacco to Amari Cooper and with that defense, yes, against Case Keenum only 4 weeks ago?
Yeah, I think it depends on the health of the other receivers, right? Like if Noah and Robert can play, then like I have more confidence. But let's say they can't play or they're like extremely limited. I don't want to say they have no shot because obviously it's the playoffs, but like their chances drop dramatically, mainly because the Browns play a lot of we're better than you football on defense. Like a lot of their calls are Jim Schwartz thinks his guys are better than your guys. And obviously like they have really good DBs, right? And if they double Nico and kind of remove him, it would get really choppy offensively. We saw it at times during the Colts game, right? Where they obviously like they jump out, they score first play of offensive play of their drive for the game or whatever. But the offense at times sputtered. Like they only had 306 yards of total offense, right? They couldn't really get the run game going, which I still respected Bobby for committing to the run because again, like if you only have one legitimate dynamic receiver, like throwing the ball 40, 45 times is kind of crazy. That's how bad things happen, you know. But again, they only had 306 yards of total offense against that Colts defense. The Browns defense is infinitely better, and they're smart enough to be able to double Nico and make other guys beat them. And if other guys can't beat them, you're going to see a lot of CJ running for his life. Behind that press rush led by Myles Garrett could be very, very problematic. Obviously, Joe Flacco and Amari aren't going to go off the way that they went last time because like they were in sync in the way that I haven't seen in a while where like it didn't matter who was in front of who was in front of Amari, he was going to catch the ball. I don't think it'd be to that degree. Obviously, they lost Elijah Moore, who brings a vertical threat from a speed component. So that's gonna allow them to focus a little bit more on those guys. They still have Marquise Goodwin, obviously, who can stretch the field a little bit, but he isn't like he's more of a guy where if you just get back, you'll be fine because you don't have to worry about his route running, like him being able to really like dice you up if you open up too early. But again, so I think obviously the Browns won't score 36. But if the Texans offense can't get other answers outside of Nico and they can't run the ball effectively, then like it's just going to be a struggle bus.
He is DJ Bien-Aime. We hope it is not a struggle bus for the Houston Texans on Saturday at NRG Stadium. Very much looking forward to that game and watching it with Mr. President.
Who's the president?
You're Mr. President. We're all saluting DJ right now. Hail to the chief. Hey, listen, I could have sang it to you like Marilyn Monroe. I didn't do that because I didn't want to make you uncomfortable. That's a friend.
You always make me uncomfortable.